fall-related snacks and coffee and hot cider back there for you, and load up on that. And we are going to be getting going in just 1 minute. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, 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 welcome. So glad that you have decided to take a portion of your week, Tuesday evening, to be with us tonight. I am so excited about this particular seminar that is all around conflict, confrontation, and hopefully, prayerfully, resolution. And so as we dive in, we're at, per usual, it's going to be a fire hose of information, while also there's going to be a ton of table talk to be able to discuss with the people around you. And so as always, this is informal. Please do what you need to do to get up and get more food and drink. Use the bathroom. There will be bathroom breaks placed right in the middle of our time together as well. And we are really, really, really excited that you are here this evening. And I say we because I have a very special friend, guest here tonight, and that is Mr. Dave Burge. Dave, you can come on up, my man. This is really, if anyone knows me whatsoever, I am fairly, very sentimental, and I am very sentimental over this man because he's been in my life for about a decade now, and was my college mentor, and he actually is one who taught me a ton of what I know on the topic of which we're discussing today. And he was a groomsman in Mary Beth and I's wedding, and has just been a massive, incredible supporter of me, which is incredibly humbling. So I wanted to give Dave just 60 seconds to introduce himself to you, and then we're going to actually launch right into our first table talk. So, Dave.
Tony, thanks for having me, and it's always fun to come full circle for those that you invest your life into, and then all of a sudden they get to lead in a way and you become so proud. It also allows you to know that you feel older when that happens. Each time that it happens, you become and feel a little bit older, but incredibly grateful to be here with you. We bring greetings from LCBC Church in the Willow Street area, is where I'm one of the pastors there and able to help that team lead in the new area of Willow Street. We're very very grateful to be here, but even more thankful just to be Tony's friend tonight and to be able to hopefully help each other grow in this space. My wife Monique and I met at Lancaster Bible College, where we actually met Tony too. We've been married for 12 years, and we have 3 kiddos, one that's 5, one that's 3, and one that just turned 1. So lots of diapers in our house, lots of Frozen in our house, and lots of wrestling in our house right now. But really, really grateful to be here with you tonight, to grow and hopefully to be encouraged.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, so hey, first table talk discussion as we dive into our time. You can see that you have, as always, you have a program guide to kind of walk you along with tons of blanks. And before we hit that table talk, there is that goal that I want to share with you at the very top. We have a roadmap and we have a goal that we are doing tonight. The goal here tonight over the next 2 hours is to gain confidence and competence in your ability to healthily handle conflict and confrontation to reach resolution in interpersonal relationships. If you were to say a big idea of the map that we're driving home today, this is the goal, this is the intent, this is the pursuit. And then for those of you who do indeed love structure and like to know where we are going, and that makes you feel at ease for your evening, this is our roadmap of conflict, confrontation, resolution, as we talk about what's the root of conflict, why is there an urgency to talk about conflict, what's our triggers behind our conflict, how do we approach conflict, how do we deliver in a dialogue in conflict, and what is a win, what's defined as wins of conflict, confrontation, and resolution. Are you ready? Let's do it. First, table talk. Here we go. On a scale of 1 to 10, time to be honest, where are you at with conflict? Number 1, on a scale, I run toward a conflict like it's Chick-fil-A, and I am very, very okay with conflict, and I like to be a part of conflict and stomp it before it ever starts. Or 10, I would rather gargle nails than deal with conflict. I would rather literally do that than anything else. Talk about it amongst your table. Where are you at on a scale 1 to 10? Go. Getting got about 20 seconds. 20 seconds. All right, begin to bring it back in. I am so curious on where almost the collective, the average of the room would be at. How if we are about an average of a room, I'd say more people tend to, well, hopefully not gargle nails. I know that was a little graphic. I apologize. I don't apologize because I put it there and I did it purposefully. But I hope that no one is way up at the 10. And if you are, I'm so glad that you're here to hopefully learn and lean in and embrace a fear. And if you're all the way to 1 and you're like, man, I literally will call out conflict any way, shape, or form I see it, I'm hoping that we can maybe teach you a little bit more of temperance and what it means to be patient with people as we step into the conversation of conflict. We have, like I said, we have our roadmap, and where we are going is going to be hopefully very succinct and linear, and so we're talking about the root. What is the root of conflict? Yes, we are talking as Christ followers, but we're also just talking within principles of leadership that are transferable to any space, and they're transferable across all time. And what is a root of conflict? There's an acronym that I want to be able to utilize today, and it's honestly not even a real acronym. I completely made it up, and I was asking Mary Beth, how do you pronounce this? Is it PUD or is it POOD? And she said POOD, I said PUD, and I'm gonna go with her, and it's POOD. So here's a POOD acronym for you to kind of walk by, like understanding what is roots of conflict, because this is our POOD acronym. Number 1 is perceived threats to identity or self-worth. Many a times we can feel like our self-worth and our identity is threatened, and when we feel threatened, we put up a wall, or we put up the arms, or we put up the guards, and we have perceived threats. There's going to be plenty of opportunity in these conversations for you to self-reflect and to wonder, is this me? And is this my wrestling, and is this my difficulty? Another root could be just poor communication. Have you ever been on the receiving end of poor communication by a show of hands? Have you ever been the poor communicator? A show of hands. Great. My hand is up. Absolutely for that. And we've all been in the receiving and giving end of poor communication. What does that do? Naturally, it just creates conflict amongst us. Number 3 is unmet needs. If we feel like if my emotional needs aren't being met, maybe by a spouse, or if we feel like my work needs aren't being met by my boss, or if we feel like my safety needs aren't being met by a close friend, we feel like unmet needs happen or lack of happening, then conflict can occur. Number 4 is unresolved past issues. Unresolved past issues. We all have our stuff. We all have our difficulties, we all have our trials, we all may have some trauma from our past. And if it's unresolved, what ends up happening, it follows us. Or if we choose to bury it or act like it doesn't exist, conflict then starts popping up like a whack-a-mole elsewhere. Been there before? Unresolved past issues. How about unvoiced expectations? This is a great one in the marital space and also in the workspace. When you thought that your spouse was going to do this and then they didn't, and then it builds up this tension inside of you, and then finally you bring it up to them and like, well, I didn't know that was expected of me. And you're like, oh, I thought it was assumed. Unvoiced expectations happen more times than we would care to admit. True? So how do we deal with that as a possible root? Number 6, differing values or convictions. It doesn't take long to realize that the people that you work with are different than you. Even if you work in the same organization that has the same mission and vision and values, you still operate differently and may even have different convictions. How do you interact with people that you say, I'm unified in mission and vision, but we still think differently or come out with different decisions at the end of this? And conflict can arise. What do you do with that? Number 7 is devaluing of personhood. And I hate to say that the unfortunate reality is that there are people in the world that deliberately try to devalue personhood. And I pray to God that that is not ever an intent that we would hold in our mind and in our heart, but fact of matter is because we are broken people and we are messed up, we can devalue others accidentally, and that causes conflict. So how do we recognize that maybe I've been devalued as a person intentionally or accidentally, or I can devalue someone accidentally or intentionally, and how do I interact with the conflict that is now there? So if that is the 7 ideas of roots of conflict, if we could boil it down to an irreducible minimum, I would say it's the word pride. And one of the most simplistic definitions I've ever heard of pride myself that I kind of adapt and utilize is pride is simply turning yourself into an idol. Pride is an inflated view of self. It also can be a deflated view of self. That also is pride. But turning yourself into an idol is to inflate yourself or to deflate yourself and to have an inaccurate view of who you are according to the Word of God, according to the love of the Father. And so if we know that, if we can understand possibly, and if you would just roll with me on this, that the roots of conflict is pride, how do we then rack our brain around my own pride? This really is a look at yourself before you look at others type of talk tonight. Because I know how easy it is to look at other people's conflict, or look at the conflict in your life and to start finger pointing. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. But how much tonight can you just look inward for a moment? Stop blame shifting and look at your own pride tonight. Look at your own idolship that you create on yourself, and how can we be better individuals? Not because we can make ourselves better, but because Jesus makes us better through his work and his grace and his love over our life. And as we see in Ezekiel chapter 28, it says this: in the pride of your heart you say, I am a God. Pause. I don't think anyone in this room would actually say, I am a god, unless you're Loki from the Avengers. You would not say that. However, do your actions reflect that? Does your mind act like that? That you are in charge over God? I sit on the throne of a God in the hearts of the seas. You are a mere mortal, and you are not a God, though you think you are as wise as a God. And we think we are as wise as God at times. Again, we would never admit it, but we act like it. At least I do. Maybe this is a confession for me. Proverbs 8:13, to fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance and evil behavior and perverse speech. The Lord detests pride, and we unfortunately live in it as broken individuals. Pride is the first step in people's downfall, but humility will bring honor. It is the first step. Pride comes before the fall. We know this. One last quote for you. Pride must die in you, or nothing of heaven can live in you. Love this. We here tonight are an all-out war against pride. That's what this conversation is about. And so to conclude this session, this piece before we head into a table talk, here's the way that I would summarize this. Deal with your pride, and you eliminate much of it internally before it becomes a problem externally. If you deal with your own pride and you do the heavy lifting, you do the work that you know needs to be done as a leader, as a Christ follower, you will eliminate it before it becomes a problem externally. However, don't deal with your pride and you compound your conflict exponentially. If you are unwilling to address your own pride, if you're unwilling to address your own downfalls, if you're not willing to address your own weaknesses and your shadow sides of who you are as a leader, as an individual, you will compound your problems and your conflict exponentially. And you're wondering, what in the world is the problem? Why do I have so much conflict? Well, maybe it's you. We're going deep tonight. Let's have a table talk. When you think about the pood that you have encountered in your life, the pood that you have encountered in your life, those 7 things, what did you learn about yourself that you didn't know prior? What did you learn about yourself that you didn't know prior? And maybe what did you learn about leadership as a result of one of these 7 ideas? So take some time, discuss that with your table, and go.
All right, take another minute, one more minute, and we'll get started on our next, the urgency. All right, so we're going to get started on the second part, which is the urgency. Hopefully you felt a little bit of the tension that Tony set up for us, right? If you're in the room, you're like, oh man, I'm not sure how hopeful I am. I'm not sure where I find. That's exactly what we want to do. We want to create that moment of saying, what does it mean for us to have urgency in the conversation around conflict and confrontation? And so there is an urgency that comes with it because ultimately we know that it hinders relational growth. You've been in conflict or confrontation before, and you know that it hinders you from growing. But it also hinders the other person from growing too. And so tonight, as you hear Tony and I kind of talk through, you have an incredible guide in front of you. But what I want to say to you is that sometimes it's actually your notes in the margins the notes on the side that are the most important, because those are the notes that God is speaking directly to you on. The Holy Spirit, if he indwells you, is going to bring to the surface things that we could never create, but you need to hear. And so as you think about the urgency, is one, you know, and I know that every time that I've ever been in conflict, it creates this sense of fear, there's shame, there's anger. All of these things happen when we're in conflict, don't they? They all happen behind us. And so a helpful way in which and I've been living by for a good bit now, is this space called kill it before it kills you. Kill it before it kills you. I'm a simple man and I need simple phrases, and simple phrases help me know where I'm at, and they help me in the verbiage helps me talk about what I'm dealing with in the moment. So you'll hear a lot of the verbiage that I will use even in my conversations with my bride, or conversations with friends, or even a conversation with a coworker. I will use some of these same verbiage that I'm going to be talking to you about, because I want to be honest and real with you. Tony wants to be honest and real with you in this conversation. So kill before it kills you. You know the moments where you have had the moment where you've had the conversation multiple times in your head. Ever been there? When you have rising tension of conflict and confrontation, you just have the conversation over and over and over again. You know it's rising, and if you're not careful, conflict is actually a really healthy thing. Hear me say this. Conflict is actually a really healthy thing, because it's actually what allows us to grow. Conflict, when it is not brought to a moment of confrontation or conversation, creates bitterness, resentment, anger, animosity, rivalry, and vain conceit. All of these things happen when we don't actually talk through them. And so one of the simple principles of what it means to be urgent in this moment is to kill it before it kills you. So what does this look like? So simply put, if you're at work and your boss sends an email that you believe and perceive to be short, okay, you ever done this before? I will air out some of my laundry. So you get a small email, and the email, you just wrote that email. It was like 2 hours it took you to write that bad boy. You send it over, and your boss just responds, thanks. Then all of a sudden, after a couple of hours, you're still stewing on it. You're still feeling it. A day goes past, and you enter wherever you may work, or maybe this is a relationship, take it into that context, and you see that they're in the parking lot or they're in the office, and all of a sudden you begin to change the way in which you enter the office because you don't want to be around that person. Then all of a sudden there's another conversation where you're around your boss, or you're around your person of significance that you might be in this situation, and then all of a sudden it just blows up. And all of the response of your boss or this loved one that you're talking to is, I am so sorry. I was actually driving in the car when I responded back to you. Do you see, in a matter of moments, something was relieved? Because what was building inside of us was that we were not willing to take and to process our own responsibility of what it looks like to have confrontation internally. We're going to talk a little bit about dialogue in just a couple of moments together. But when we talk about dialogue, we're going to hopefully give you some ways to talk about you're having confrontation, you're having conflict, and we want to help you be able to have those. So just live by this principle. Kill it before it kills you. The next is this. You can't correct what you aren't willing to confront. You cannot correct what you aren't willing to confront. This seems like a no-brainer, but you would be amazed. You would be amazed that even right now in our society, that you cannot correct what you aren't willing to confront. Too often, we would rather talk about having conflict with someone than to actually have it. Let me say it one more time. Too often, we would rather talk about having conflict with someone without really having it. And that, to be honest with you, is just not the right way for us to grow and It's not healthy for us, and more importantly, it's not healthy for the person on the other side of that confrontation or that conflict. Because remember, all conflict is not bad. It actually creates growth. We want to grow. We want to grow in our relationships. And ultimately, you are here tonight. You chose to be here tonight at the end of your workday or at the end of your social day to be in a room to grow. So you already are on the way to growing to be there, because we know we want to keep growing. And so you can't correct what you aren't willing to confront. And then lastly in this part, if you don't talk about it, you'll act about it. If you don't talk about it, you will act about it. And what that means is if you continue to build that case for yourself up and up, all of a sudden that conversation has a way to ooze out, to spill out, to permeate out into our actions. That's why a lot of times when there may be a moment where you may say to yourself, man, I just haven't been feeling good recently. My stomach's been in knots. I've had to go to the doctor multiple times, and they don't have any prescriptions for me. I wake up every morning, and I just feel like there is a headache that I cannot get rid of. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that resolving conflict is going to solve all those problems for you, but your body, my body, will keep the score, and it will tell us if we aren't willing to confront it first, so that ultimately, if you're thinking about it, you're thinking about it, you're thinking about it, then you probably need to act on it. Live by this principle. If you've had this conversation in your brain more than twice, it's time to move to action. There needs to be urgency, because urgency will drive us to growth, where we don't have the opportunity to not grow in how we present and also engage with conflict and confrontation. In our hopes at the end of that is to end in resolution, right? We want resolution. We have a God who wants resolution for us. He sent Jesus so that he could give us resolution. The grand narrative that you and I are both on is one of restoration and resolution. It truly is. And so when we live out in our urgency to have and to engage conflict and confrontation, we will live out. We kill it before it kills us, right? We make sure that we do that. We also know that we cannot not afford to engage in that conflict. And also, we know that if we don't talk about it, we're going to end up living it out and acting on it. So as you think about that, let's release you to some table talk. Here's your 2 questions. Of the 3 urgency statements, which one is the most convicting to you and why? And then also, how do you see acting it out take place in your life when you do not verbally handle conflict? Ooh, that's a good one. Go ahead and enjoy your conversation around the table.
You have about 1 minute left. 1 minute left. All right, begin to bring it back in. So I just want you to know that a lot of what Dave already mentioned is stuff that has been principles that either we've been trying to live out in Mary Beth and I's marriage, or secondarily even within our youth staff team here at Gateway. The kill it before it kills you is a mantra that Mary Beth and I have been using for all 7 years of our marriage, and it's been really, really good. And that's thanks to Dave and his influence on my life in that way, and then also to the point where it became a value within our youth staff team of what it means to be a person of aggressive integrity is to kill it before it kills you. And so that has already left indelible marks on me as a person. So I hope that over time that a principle like that could do the same for you. So we are diving into the trigger now. And this is not a fun word per se, the idea of getting triggered, but that is kind of what we're talking about in the realm of conflict and confrontation, because the fact of the matter is that everyone gets triggered differently. Everyone gets set off by a certain level of conflict at different spaces. Some people, you may know of an individual that has what we could call a little bit of a longer fuse, like they are more patient and long-suffering, and they don't get angry as easily. And then you may know of an individual that maybe has a really short fuse, and they get really angered or irked very quickly. And then somewhere in between are the average of people. And so we all get triggered differently by different things, whether that be someone cutting you off on the road, whether that be a coworker who sends an email 2 days later than what they said they would, to a spouse that said, I'm gonna do this, and then they don't, to someone who just says a word the wrong way that you say it differently. So whether you say caramel or caramel, it may trigger you if you get irked very easily. By the way, it absolutely is caramel, in my opinion, and therefore you may have just got triggered by that. I don't care. Caramel is the way that it is said. Everyone gets triggered differently. Therefore, we need to know the root of what sets you off. You must be a learner of self. So if you look at those 7 and you had a discussion and dialogue about these, if you were being honest, maybe for you, poor communication really just grinds your gears, and that makes you go to a 10 really easily. Or maybe it is the differing of values, and for someone you can say, you know what, we have different values and that's okay. Where someone's like, no, like that really messes with me. You need to know what it ends up setting you off. Not in a way of, oh, now I can utilize that to my advantage. On the contrary, actually, so I can become more long-suffering in the thing that actually irks me more quickly. And we need to be learners of ourself, which is the heavy lifting. It is the heavy lifting to be a continual learner of self. You are leaders. You are in this room because you are a leader. Leaders are learners. Are you willing to commit to the learningship of self? Not for the sake of self and your own accolades and your accomplishments and your achievements. No. So you actually could be a better self, to be more selfless. That's the intent. Learn more of self to become more selfless so that we can become more like Jesus. That is the intent as we embrace conflict and confrontation and prayerfully resolution. Be a learner of self. Are you willing to be a learner of self? It takes a lot of work, honestly, an exorbitant amount of work. But I can almost guarantee the person who is willing to learn and learn and learn is the person who's going to go further in their leadership, further in their influence. Again, not because I'm going to become a better influencer, I'm going to become a better leader, I'm going to get that better title. No, because I am wanting to be selfless, to just extol the name of Jesus through my position or through my relationship or through my title, whatever that may be. But I need to know the trigger, what gets me wanting to punch something. We need to be honest. We need to be willing. So again, there's different ways that we respond to trigger responses. So maybe, and when I just said punch, you're like, oh my gosh, I would never do that. I would never aggressively go at, that's not me. Okay, cool, that might not be you, but maybe you're something else. These are some of the responses to trigger. So one of them is fight, and you're like, literally, I'm gonna throw hands at someone. Like, this is my knee-jerk response. When someone sets me off, when the person cuts me off, when the person irks me, that is my more not literally throw hands, but like you want to feel like you're going to. Again, we're not advocating for punching here. I'm just saying that's what the sinful side of you wants to do. Maybe you're not fight, but maybe you're more flight. And you're like, bye. I'm going to run now. Tuck tail, run, get out of here, get out of Dodge. I don't want to deal with this. This makes me uncomfy. This makes me feel so, I don't want to deal with this. Bye. So maybe that's more your response of, I'm just going to run now. Maybe number 3 is you, where you're just more like freeze and you just kind of go into just complete statue mode. Brain shuts off. You don't know what to say. You don't know how to respond. You just kind of go, whoop. So maybe you freeze in conflict. And maybe that's you. Number 4, and this may be this might be a newer possible word for you, but fawning. It's in the counseling world, it's a newer term over the past couple of years that's been coming out, and it's this idea of people pleasing. It's this idea of always saying, I'm sorry. Oh, no, you can do it. Oh, no, it's okay. Like it's deferring to the other person inappropriately. And some of us may struggle with that, but the idea of inappropriately deferring to another person. And then number 5 is to fake it. I'm okay. It's okay. I'm fine. The situation's fine. And you're twitching like over in the corner. No, you're not fine. As Dave said, your body is telling you you're not fine, but you're fighting it and you're saying you are fine. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, fake. Every single one of us is in one of these categories. Some of us are in multiple of them. As a response to how we engage or lack of engage conflict. So here's the synthesized statement before we hit our next table talk is this. The danger of you not identifying your trigger is a couple things. Number 1 is you become a walking red flag. Like, if you are unwilling to be a learner of self and know how you engage inappropriately with conflict and the unhealthy side, the shadow side of your leadership, because we all have it. We all have shadow side, just a matter of whether we're willing to own it or not. You will become a walking red flag. Like Dave said, you will act it out if you choose not to talk it out. And you become a walking red flag. Number 2 is that you wear a victim mentality. It's always the other person's fault. I am the one I'm the one that's getting hurt in this situation. Are there times and are there situations where you are the one that is the victim? Yes. Oh my goodness, yes. But if you always have a victim mentality, maybe is there something wrong in the way that you're thinking and processing through the conflict? And your reputation will go before you. We've heard the phrase, your reputation precedes you. So if you become known as someone who is someone who always freezes in conflict, they're not going to maybe want to talk to you because they're just going to think that you're just going to go straight-faced and not know how to talk to you. And then they think that they're the problem because you will not, because they won't talk about it. Maybe they are the one who always says, oh, I'm sorry, and they just defer to you. No, like that's not healthy dialoguing. Like, let's have a conversation about it, and let's both own so like your reputation will go before you. And then lastly is to say that people will just run from you. If you're a terrible conflictor, people are not gonna wanna engage with you. So how do we do that? Well, sorry, there's one more, and the last one is people will take advantage of you. Yikes, that's not a fun one. People will take advantage of you. The idea of being a doormat, the idea of you not respecting yourself, so therefore you almost give people permission to not respect you. So if you identify your trigger in general, you become equipped to handle the problems healthily. If you identify what is your trigger, you will become equipped. I'm not saying you're going to have the perfect answers and solutions. They're going to be good at the snap of a finger, but you'll be equipped to handle the problems more healthily. However, reverse that. If you ignore your trigger, you will become the problem and perpetuate unhealthiness. Which one do you want? To do the former takes an exorbitant amount of work. To do the latter is what we can default to do within our own laziness or sin or arrogance, etc. So therefore, let's have some more conversation about this. On a scale of 1 to 10, let's have some honesty about where you're at. How well do you presently handle conflict in the moment? Just in general, a conflict moment hits you. You walk through a door, boom, conflict's there. How well do you handle it is your knee-jerk response. And then what have you done to achieve health in your trigger, maybe? If you would say, hey, I kind of wrestle with this one, what have I done to maybe achieve some health? And it's almost to share some tricks of the trade that have maybe shown some success. Let's have a conversation about that right now.
All right, take one more minute, and then we'll jump into the approach. All right, let's bring it back and talk a little bit about the approach. I know this content is hitting in some ways because every time we transition to table talk, I've heard groans. I've heard, oh gosh, I can't. This is exactly why we're in the conversation together. We're going to kind of give you the fire hydrant and then allow you to kind of navigate together what that looks like. So here's the one. We want to talk about the approach. And as we talk about the approach, we know that so often we know that there needs to be a conversation, right? We now know that there's urgency. We understand a little bit about our triggers, okay? We know that as we want to engage in conflict, we know where we land right now because we are able to look through those 5 and say, I'm normally someone who fights. We now know these things. Now we want to talk about the approach. How do we actually do it? What are some of the ways in which we can do it? And simply, again, I'm going to give you a couple of phrases that I'll put together that hopefully help you. It's this. It's the right conversation with the right person at the right time. It is the right conversation with the right person at the right time. Too often, we have been offended or even hurt by someone, and we don't actually go to have that conversation with that person. It's confusing to me because I'm just like you. You're just like me. I may be hurt or I may know that I need to have a confrontation or a conflict with somebody, and immediately I don't go to that person. I don't go to the right person. I go to someone else. Why is that? Why do we do that? It's because I think there are some times where we might actually not know some of the ways in which our body is telling us we need to have the conversation. So we need to not only have the right conversation with the right person at the right time, but we need to know that it has to be the right conversation. So we start with the right conversation with the right person at the right time. The right conversation is being able to name and identify what you actually have a conflict around. What is it that you feel a tension in? How do you have that tension, and what does it look like? Because the right conversation, sometimes you just stop there. Because the right conversation actually doesn't need to be done with anyone except for you. The right conversation starts and maybe ends with you. Because you're the one who's in conflict. You're the one who is battling pride, which we all named together, as Tony was able to lead us through, is that's what we're facing. We have it with the right person, and then we also have it at the right time. You know there's actually a bad time to have conflict. If you're in a relationship with someone, if you have a spouse or a dear friend, have you ever tried to have a confrontation at the wrong time? That adds into more conflict. That's like putting dynamite at the dam and just blowing that bad boy up and just letting it run through. It is just not good. You need to know the right time. How do you know the right time? You ask God to help you with the right time. You ask the Holy Spirit to give you a sense of urgency, a sense of understanding, and maybe even a sense of peace. That even though you might feel that conflict rising up in your body, you know it's the right time to have it. And I'll be honest, this one is one of the areas where Christians and followers of Jesus have a lot of work to do. I don't know why it may be, but for some reason, we often have the wrong conversation with the wrong person at the wrong time. Where too often we may lack the understanding or even knowing for our own selves that actually conflict and confrontation is for relational growth. We have to go after and be people who want to grow. And so as followers of Jesus, we have to do that. And again, a new and a good indicator, even as we talked about some of those things, is if you're having the conversation over and over again, it's time to have the right conversation with the right person at the right time. Next is remember the why over the what. Remember the why over the what. We'll talk again a little bit in the delivery here around what it looks like for us to have that. But too often in conflict, all we go after is the what. You sent that text message and I didn't really enjoy it. Is that really the issue? No. The why is your text message, the text message that I got, made me feel little, belittled, devalued. See the difference? The why over the what. We have to get to the why. And as we talk about the why, and as we think about what it means for us to deliver the why, we have to be careful to not just deliver on and talk about the what, but to have to go over the why.
And a couple of things that we want to also process is as we remember the why over the what, how do we approach it as someone who is, number 3, calm, cool, and collected? I could go for a significant period of time discussing this concept called our non-verbal cues, our body language, and how we change, we interpret so much of other people and what they're thinking and what we think they're thinking and what they think they're thinking of us through our non-verbal cues. We need to be aware of how we are calm, cool, and collected. You have the power, did you know this? You have the power to escalate or de-escalate the situation simply by your reactions, your posture, and your face. Your face can really escalate the situation. Because someone gets irked, and then you get irked by that, and it turns into an irk fest, and your faces are just showing it all. You have the power to escalate or de-escalate a situation. I was telling a volunteer a year or two ago that they were saying that this student just keeps getting, gets a rise out, enjoys getting a rise out of me being annoyed. I'm like, well, then stop showing it on your face. It's not rocket, don't egg it on by showing that you're annoyed. If you show that you're annoyed, they're gonna wanna keep doing it. Same is true with adult conflict, unfortunately, because we can be that petty. Vanessa Van Edwards says this: your nonverbal cues influence by either enhancing or detracting from how your words are understood. About a year, I can't keep track of the seminars. About a year ago, maybe Tiffany Lentz and I did a seminar on all about your verbal and your nonverbal cues. And I would highly recommend going back to that seminar. It's archived on YouTube. When I send the email out tomorrow with the link for this one, I'll tag that one specifically because it was all about nonverbal cues and how to enhance your leadership through the knowledge of your verbal and nonverbal cues. Calm, cool, collected. Number 4, not a bounty hunter. When we are embracing conflict, we must not be a bounty hunter. What do I mean by this? Number 1, the idea of sniping conflict quietly to save personal reputation. What does that mean? It's the idea that, hey, I'm gonna take care of conflict quickly and quietly, but not because it's for the betterment of the organization or the betterment of me or betterment of the organization. No, it's for the betterment of me, and it makes me look good if I silence that conflict, and I'm gonna be a bounty hunter and get rid of the conflict that makes my reputation look bad. Now, that's a heavy concept to sift through, but that is what we are not looking to do, and just make yourself look good. No, we have to be willing to deal with conflict, even if it makes you look bad. We have to. Number 2 is maliciously using a rap sheet against them. So you are stacking up their bad deeds or their lack of love or their lack of value against them so that one day you can just load it out on them. Has that ever happened to you? How'd that make you feel? We cannot be a bounty hunter in the way that we deal with conflict. Number 5. Last word, or one word is we have to be willing to track our motive. Why? Back to what Dave said. Why am I doing what I'm doing? The why drives our what. We need to know our motive in why we are addressing conflict. Number 5 is this idea of humble but confident. As we approach conflict, we must be willing to be humble and yet confident. Here's a couple of ways to understand that. We need to live with a tough skin but a soft heart. You must be willing, as you embrace conflict, as difficult as it may be, as embarrassing or as awkward as it may be, you have to be willing to live with that tough skin that, yes, I'm standing rooted in a conviction, and I'm gonna live by that conviction. However, I'm gonna have a tender heart as I embrace the conversation. Humble, but confident. Here's another way to think about it, is I am gonna stand in confidence while I'm open to correction. We must be willing to walk confidently as leaders. Otherwise, you are going to cripple and people aren't going to want to follow you if you're not living in confidence. But you have to be willing to receive correction. Are you an individual who's able to receive correction? Do your colleagues think that you are someone who can receive correction? Is your spouse, do you think that they think that you can receive correction? Does your best friend feel like they can offer you a word of critique if they think that you're in the wrong? Are you a person who's approachable in this way? And then thirdly, embodies confidence but not cockiness. There's a very, very fine line between confidence and cockiness. Very fine line. But we must be willing to embrace the confidence that doesn't kind of jump over the edge to cockiness and pride and sin. So that's what we are continuing to talk about.
You know, it's always funny every time, I think this might be your book. Until you take my notes, there you go. I think there might be a time, you know, every time that there's an opportunity, you come to a conversation like this, I guarantee if it hasn't happened yet today, tomorrow or the next day, you're gonna have conflict, okay? So I don't email Tony and tell him, I can't believe I came to this because all I've had is conflict. No, I actually believe that when we talk about these things, and as we understand what Jesus is doing in your life and the Holy Spirit at work here, that there are gonna be opportunities for you to live this out either tonight on your drive home, or tomorrow, or even sometime this week. And just a case point for me, as I'm preparing, as we're talking, as Tony and I have been planning over the last couple of months for our time together, even this week, on Monday, I got home, and as we got home, we have 3 little kids. They're all going crazy, and I grabbed Dawson, and my wife was making dinner, and I could tell immediately, this is a confrontation. Are you ready? And as we had these moments, my trigger is I was raised in a home, so we are a culmination of our upbringing, good or bad, okay? Can't run from that. You have to embrace that. And as I was raised in that upbringing, we would always fight. It's just what was our response. And so as we started talking about this subject, I lost my nerve. I didn't ask any of the questions. I didn't have the right conversation. I didn't have it with the right person. I was mad at somebody at work, and then all of a sudden I'm in that moment. But you know, it was in that moment of what Tony was just saying about having tough skin, but being confident in that moment, that I knew that the right person in that room was Monique. That's my wife's name. And I had to have that conversation with her. There was this confidence that came from saying, man, I need to embrace all that we're talking about it. Because then I said to her, and I'm not joking, if she was here or I would FaceTime her right now, I led the conversation by saying this: I have to kill it before it kills me. No joke. I have to kill it before it kills me. So no, just because we're talking tonight does not mean that we are paramount in this subject. If anything, we're working together with you, and be ready. The conflict's coming your way. If you haven't had any yet today, it's coming in the next couple of days. But now you will be prepared to be better at it. And so the next way is some helpful phrases to live by. Here's a helpful phrase to live by. Again, I'm going to give you a ton of phrases. Questions over directives. Questions over directives. This can be played in a couple different areas as you think about conflict in your workplace, or as you think about conflict in just your relationships. We want to give questions over directives. In your workplace, you may have that conversation around a team member who isn't making it on time for the meeting. Okay? Here's what a question looks like. Hey, Fred, I actually realized that you, over the last couple of weeks, have been coming really close to the start of our meeting time. Can I just ask you a question? Is everything okay at home? Here's a directive. Hey, Fred, our meetings start at Monday at 9 a.m. I expect you to be there next Monday. Directives over questions. Now, mind you, there are times where you have to save your bank of directives, because if anybody is a parent in this room, you understand that you probably give out directives all day long. I'm constantly telling my son Declan, he is our middle child, to not put his hand on hot things. So my directives to him are, do not touch the stove when the water is boiling for your macaroni and cheese that you love. Do not do that. That is a directive. Know that there is so much life that is brought when you ask questions over directives, because questions let the people or let the person know that you actually are in this conflict or confrontation for them. You haven't come to this conflict or confrontation for you. You've come because you want something for them. Do you supervise people? Are you a leader in this room that have people report into you? When was the last time you asked your teammates, your employees, questions rather than directives? Man, they would feel so much more involved in the process, but it also is a great principle as you think about creating and the approach of that. And here's another one. Go positive or go silent. What's this principle mean? This principle is too often we recreate conflict because we open our mouths first before we open our hearts. Too often we create conflict because we open our mouths first before we open our hearts. And so my encouragement to you, my encouragement to each of us as followers of Jesus is to go positive or to go silent. This takes a ton of discipline. And hear me clearly. I'm not saying that in conflict and confrontation, don't go home tonight and tell your loved one that, hey, Dave, this guy was at our time together, and he told me we really don't need to talk about anything anymore. Because he told me I should go positive or I should go silent. This is not what I'm saying. It's the spirit of this that I'm trying to get to. What I want to encourage us in is that too often we allow our mouth to speak before we allow our heart to speak. And we have to navigate this so that we find favor and understanding and position in the lives of believers and non-believers. My friends, if we could live by this principle even right now in our society, could you imagine what it would look like for us as a society to go positive or to go silent? This one has a lot to do with you personally, and ultimately it has a lot to do with the cause of why we would be complaining, why we would be in this moment of conflict. Because often, just like we've been talking about, conflict starts with us. And as we think about this, as we think about how do we approach these conversations, we're reminded that in those simple ways of being confident and not cocky is the same way of then going positive or going silent. We have to make sure that as we think about conflict and confrontation, we ultimately know, again, that we want to lead towards resolution. So now it's time to release the table talk. And in this table talk, here are these two questions. Which of these approaches is helpful for you to consider? Which one? We gave you a litany of them. And then what are examples of different types of questions, good, you could ask, and directives, bad, you shouldn't ask? What are some good questions? There's some wisdom in this room, I can tell tonight. There is some good wisdom in the room that you could share around the table together. Enjoy the conversation, and then when we're done with conversation, you're going to be dismissed to a quick restroom break. So enjoy the conversation, and then I'll release you to restrooms in just a moment. take one more minute around the table, and then we'll dismiss for a quick restroom break. All right, so we are gonna release you to a restroom break or to refill on your apple cider. You have about a 3-minute window here, okay? So 8:21, we're gonna get back at it, okay? So 8:21, we're gonna be right back at it together. So enjoy that restroom break and refill of apple cider, and we will be back in just about 3 minutes.
Got about 30 seconds, and we are diving in.
All right, so we're going to jump in together, and you can kind of remember here, this is our roadmap of where we've been. Can you believe it already? We've been through the root, the urgency, the trigger, the approach, and now we're going to talk about the delivery. the delivery. We've already been so far on this journey together, and it's only 8:20. Wow. Thank you so much. I know that you guys are enjoying conversation. Feel free to get that hot apple cider. Just let the hot apple cider sit for a solid 6 minutes before you consume it, because it is molten lava. It is absolutely molten lava. I tried that out right before I came up. Compliments to the chef. Compliments to the chef. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the delivery together. Here's your next space. Again, these phrases: truth with grace. Truth with grace. And it's amazing to me that these two things coexist, that we can be truthful while also being grace-filled. Do you know Jesus was excellent at this? Jesus would have lived and has lived, and we learn from him often in this way of how to be truthful, but yet being full of grace. And as we think about it being truthful and full of grace, we have to understand that so often we create conflict and confrontation because we aren't willing to speak up or speak in. Here's new verbiage for you. Speak up or speak in to a conflict or confrontation because for some reason our pride, which we started with, has gotten a hold of us and we're not willing to do it. Truth with grace. I love this reminder that Jesus is talking to a group of his followers, and this is actually right after, if you are reading through God's word with us, right after Jesus is talking about the lost sheep. He just talks about how the shepherd would leave the 99 to go after the one, and then he talks about how do we find out and do biblical a way of how we live within community. And this is what he says in Matthew 18. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. Sounds like the right person at the right time, right? Right conversation too. Between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of the 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. I love that Jesus in this moment is so full of truth and grace. Because in this moment, if you're around in that moment, and even as you think about what he's talking about, he's identifying that you have to be truthful. You have to be truthful with one another. And too often, we're not willing to speak up or to step in to the conflict. And how do we do that? We do that with truth and also grace. And remind yourself to get out of thinking and move to doing. Get out of your thinking and move to your doing. Notice what's not there. I didn't say get out of your praying and start your doing. We should be prayerfully considering throughout our entire moment of confrontation or conflict, we should be asking God himself to help us. So I'm not saying to stop praying. What I am saying is to stop thinking and move to doing. And as we think about these two things in the delivery of how we have conflict and confrontation, we want to be people that are full of truth and grace, while also moving from just thinking into our doing. Now what we want to kind of give you is some really good handles that I found to be life-giving to the both of us as we navigated what does it look like for us to actually have this conversation that may lead to conflict or confrontation.
And I would say that, echoing what Dave said a little bit ago, is that this is a conversation. This whole 2 hours together is something that we would say, man, we have the furthest from mastered and the furthest from gotten down right. There can be a bit of an imposter syndrome at times when you are on a stage sharing something where you're like, I just biffed it like a week ago or yesterday. And it can be quite humbling to be like, am I actually adequate for this? And so, no, you're not alone if you struggle with handling conflict healthily. Dave and I are right there with you, very, very, very much so. So how can we have a framework of conflict? Now, of having conflict conversation in the initiation of a conversation. This is a framework that I want to present to you for your consideration, and this is a framework. This is not a complete framework. This is not the framework. This is not the one that came down from heaven. This is just a framework of how you could have conversation with someone that you are in interpersonal conflict with, be it a boss, be it a colleague, be it a friend, be it a neighbor, someone on social media, whatever it may be. How do I embrace having a conversation now that we have talked about it and we've set it up? So, that being said, the first phrase that you could say, not that you must say, but you could say, is you say, hey, I have noticed. So you go to someone and you say, I have noticed that you have been late to our meetings. I have noticed that the lawn continues to get higher than what it should. I have noticed ... You're just making an observation. And you are coming to the table with said observation. Now, from said observation, it has made me feel ... I've noticed that you have been late to meetings, and it has made me feel like you are not caring about when the promptness and of what it means to be present on time. I have noticed it. It has made me feel blank. Thirdly, then you can go into an idea of, as a result, it has caused me to. Now, keep in mind with this. These are I statements, me statements, me statements. Why? Because we are addressing me. We're not addressing you as the root problem. We're saying this is what I'm observing. This is what has made me feel. And now as a result of you being late, it makes me feel devalued. Or it makes me feel like you don't care, or it makes me feel like, and this is where the pointed statement can come into play, and you're being more direct with them. It has caused me to feel. Now, the fourth statement is just as important, if not way more important, because now it brings the onus back on possibly you to say, I could be completely reading this wrong. Like, hey, I could be completely reading it wrong, that maybe the text that we've been exchanging, maybe they haven't been passive aggressive, and I could be completely reading it wrong. Or maybe that we had a conversation a week ago, and I may have interpreted it wrongly. It gives you an opportunity to say, hey, I could be wrong. We must be willing to have that posture of I could be wrong. Now, here's the weird thing. I don't know if this is right or wrong. You can be the judge of this. Even if I know, here's what's weird. Even if I know I'm right, I will still say I could be wrong. Why? Because it shows a genuineness of hopeful humility of I still could be wrong even if I know I'm right. And it lets them know I'm willing to have a dialogue with you and not just put it right in their face. So right or wrong, you can scrutinize that one later. But then the fifth and final statement is to say, would you be able to help me understand your perspective? It's now an invitation. It's not a directive, and it is an invitation. Could you help me understand? So again, you're noticing these are me and I statements. Now, again, this is a model, this is a framework, this is not the absolutes, and there are so many other times you have to come at it with directives, as Dave said. And it's less of this, and it is, and there is moments of putting someone in their place. That is absolutely needed, and I need to exercise that more often if I'm being honest. So, this is a possible framework to think through. As we continue to talk, we're gonna come back to that in just a moment, and Dave and I will actually utilize an example of this. But here's the thought: is that as you are pursuing a delivery of conflict to someone, your goal is to find peaceful outcomes. Your goal is not to let one be a winner and one be a loser. Your goal is to find peaceful outcomes. as much as you can have it, be at peace with all people. So how are we choosing peaceful outcomes? To avoid triggering languages, come back to that conversation of triggers. You have a trigger. We've kind of admitted that. Hopefully you've admitted that. But the person that is across from you probably also has a trigger. Now, if you know them at all, if they're a best friend, if they're a spouse, if they're a coworker, if they're a boss, and you know them whatsoever, you may know what triggers them. It would be wrong of you, very wrong, for you to intentionally utilize the thing that triggers them. But we do that sometimes. So stop it. Period. Avoid triggering language. Be willing to be the bigger person. Avoid what you know is going to irk them. It takes a lot of maturity, and I understand that, but I believe in you. Have empathy. Have empathy. Have empathy, have empathy. What in the world does that mean? Having the ability to abandon your own world and to step into the world of the person across from you. Abandon your world, abandon your own, not convictions, but abandon the things that you hold true and say, you know, I want to feel what they feel. I want to feel their emotions, their narrative. I don't know what's going on in their story. I don't know what's going on in their life, but I want to understand. I want to have empathy. I want to step into the world of the person across from me because then I can meet them where they're at in the dialogue. In the conflict. Have empathy. So there's a couple other thoughts that we want to have now as we talk about the exchanging of conversation. So you've initiated the conversation. You've laid out the framework. Now you're shutting up to let them talk because you asked, can I help you, or can you help me understand your perspective? So now you've invited them to talk. Thank you for letting them talk. Now they talk back to you. And now here's the invitation. Be defenseless. Because so often we like to raise up in our mind the yeah buts. And the yeah but you don't, just stop. Just let them, you've had your moment, now let them have their moment. And be defenseless. Engage in a moment of I am not going to put up the fists and the gauntlets because maybe they don't respond great to you. Okay, that's a real thing. But how do I understand that? Is this an argument to win or a relationship to restore? An argument to win or a relationship to restore, how you answer that question will change the dynamic or the very words that you utter and the words that you think, no matter what they say. Argument to win, relationship to restore. And then also I would say this, is are you willing to find something, a common ground that you can affirm or agree upon? I know that there might be that person in your life that does drive you nuts. And how can I still find something that I can agree in a moment of conflict? Because that can help disseminate tension when you find something that you can agree upon. Now, again, these are not absolute, so I'm not saying that this is going to work every single time, because it will not, and there are going to be moments of we do not see eye to eye, and that is not going to change. Can we still find something we agree upon? Maybe. We can hopefully agree that we're going to be honoring towards each other, even if we completely and utterly disagree, but find something that you can agree or be affirmed by. Number two, as we exchange in this dialogue, is we're going to actively listen. Actively listening is way more than just hearing, and it's way more than just listening. Actively listening is participating in the conversation, and you are listening to the words that are not being said. You are listening to the emotions between the words. You are listening to the posture that they have. You are engaging holistically with them, not just with the words that they are uttering. And so, as you actively listen, here's a thought that when they are now giving their spiel to you, they are now done. One of the first things that could come out of your mouth is this idea of repeating back what they have said. So, what I'm hearing you say is ... Now, there's a way to say this in a condescending way, and there's a way to say it in a way that actually is affirming and valuing towards the person. Please don't do it in a condescending way. But do it in a way to say, hey, so what I'm hearing you say is that the way that I've been sending text messages to you has been kind of ambiguous, and it's been making you feel unsure of how I stand with you. Yeah? And then they, yeah, that's help them understand that you are computing the conversation, and then you say, did I get it? Am I picking up what you're putting down? Repeat back to them what they have said. How about number 3? Oh man, this one will rev me up. Take ownership and freaking apologize. You can put like a little carrot in there that says freaking. Because we live in a society that doesn't like to apologize. That doesn't like to take ownership for the things that they have done. Be willing to, two of the most difficult words to utter is I'm sorry, I am sorry, 3 words, 2 words, whichever you want to slice that. But it is one of the most difficult phrases to utter is I am sorry, because we are admitting we are wrong, and we don't like doing that, do we? If you want to diffuse conflict, you got to be willing to take ownership. Even if they are 90% wrong, you still have 10% in the wrong. You got to be willing to own it. Are you a person who utters the phrase, I'm sorry? We have to be willing to do that. Take ownership and apologize. Remove the yeah buts, man and woman up, just own it. So much conflict is escalated just because people aren't willing to own it. And they dig themselves into a hole, and they dig themselves into the defenses, just go up and up and up. Like, so much conflict can actually be dealt with and handled and diffused by just owning it. People don't dig their heels in more. Conflict kind of goes away a lot more easily. So easier said than done. My goodness, I know this to be true. But take ownership and apologize. Here's what I want to do. Dave, come on up for a moment. We want to take a second to pause and have a moment of dialogue as if we were in conflict with each other, because we've never been in conflict with each other, so this is actually going to be a first for
never
us.
Never been in conflict together.
And really, it's the conflict that really he's been in conflict with me, and he has to knock me upside the head over the years. But here's what we want to do. We're not going to have a dialogue. We're just going to frame that framework of the 5 things. And just to give you another idea, this is not a perfect science, but maybe it can help. So I'll share my conflict first, and then Dave's gonna do this. We're not gonna dialogue about it. We're just doing that 5-phrase framework. So hey, Dave. I've noticed that I'll go with the texting, because that's a pretty real thing for us, texting to each other. So hey, Dave, I've noticed that in our text messages that when I have been asking you questions, you leave me on red. Like quite a bit, and then sometimes when you've like responded, like it can be really short. Sometimes I'm not sure if like you're happy or you're confused or if you're angry with me actually, and like it makes me feel confused sometimes about our friendship at times. Now, that could be some of my own problem, but like I am just noticing that it can make me feel confused at times. And as a result, it makes me feel less confident at times when I interact with you in person about like, do we have a conflict in that text conversation, or are we not? And that's just my own perception, but we're actually good. Or we actually aren't good, and I don't really know what to do with that. So like I could be completely reading it wrong. We could be great, and I could be in my head completely, because I can get in my head more times than I would care to admit. So I could be completely wrong. But would you be able to help me understand your perspective on some of those text messages of how we have exchanged between us?
Killer. I'm not allowed to respond,
No,
so
you're
I'm
not
going to give you
allowed
mine.
to respond.
This is really good. Awesome. So I'll do my side. And we'll talk just a little bit. We'll get a little bit more personal in a good way, but we'll just talk together. So, hey, Tony, I've noticed over the last couple of weeks that you've been shorter. I perceive that you've been shorter to a couple of your friends that you would call dear. And I know that that's normally not how you interact. And so as I've noticed, it's made me feel like there might be something going on. And I could be wrong. Like, I could be wrong, Tony, but I love you too much to not actually just say, I've seen it happen, and I just want to ask, how's Tony? Knowing 100% that I need you to give me the perspective of how you've been doing, because I know at times I can get it wrong, but I care too much to not ask, and for you to give me just a little bit of perspective about how you've been doing recently. So you see the difference between the two? Sometimes what we overcomplicate is that we don't get honest. Do you know how honest I had to be? in that moment of just saying, this is how it made me feel. And as a guy, let me just speak to dudes in the room right now, that's harder for us for some reason. And I think it's because we misinterpret that ultimately that we need to be gentle and lowly in heart because Jesus identifies himself as gentle and lowly. And so if we can begin to be identified in that way in that conversation, the dialogue continues to be better.
Yeah, and gosh, I feel like even just with him doing that to me right now, it's like, I think I did something wrong because you were just
Do you remember college? You remember those are the conversations, you know?
My goodness. Can you see why I love this man? Like, I just am, gosh. And he also can say things quicker than when I can, too, which is, I need to keep learning from him still. So, verbal and nonverbal communication. Let's hit number 4. Here's a thought for you. When you have conflict with someone, this may not be appropriate at certain times, but it could be very appropriate other times. I'm maybe more so thinking like of a spouse that maybe sitting next to with physical touch rather than sitting like across from them. If this is a opportunity, David, come over here because this is more helpful. Rather than standing across from each other, what if you sat next to each other like on the couch and maybe this is more of a marital move, but like you held their hand while you had the conflict moment. It helps diffuse the emotional and physical touch that can come from that.
He's not going to hold my hand right now. I'm walking away.
Don't do that. Don't do that to your boss. That would be really, really weird. Scott, I promise I won't do that. But it's something to consider. Something about physical touch can, maybe not for every single person, but it can help lower that feeling of I am with you and I'm not against you. Something to consider. Using we language as well is that how can we be part of the solution? How can we attack the problem together? Not how can you do better? Not what can you bring to the table? How can we sort through this together? And then thirdly is to have this type of what I would call an I mean it phrase. It's this idea that you're utilizing a phrase that let me use Mary Beth and I as a real-time example. So if we're at the end of a conflict and we have discussed it and we've talked through it and we processed through it, we've cried about it, and now we're done with it, and I can ask the question, Mary Beth, like, are we good? And if we get to the end of this conversation and she will use a particular word to indicate we are good and everything has been on the table and there's nothing else to say, we are good, and I'm not going to walk away with animosity, I'm not going to walk away with awkwardness, and I'm not going to walk away with whatever. That word that we use is the word truly. So if she says we are truly good, I can walk away with peace of mind knowing that we are actually good. I don't have to walk around on eggshells. If she doesn't use the word, it means that there's still something else to talk about. So here's an invitation maybe, is to come up with a word with your spouse, come up with a word with your boss, come up with a word that you could say, hey, so just so we can go so black and white together and we know with absolute certainty that we are good, that this is okay, can we use a word almost like that we use as I mean it phrase? And if that word is not used, then we know there's still something to talk about. And almost used as a way of accountability, possibly. It's something that Mary Beth and I have used in our marriage, and it has been so, so good. Maybe something that I would recommend to use. Some table talk time. We're going to do just a couple of minutes for this one as we come to the end of our time here. So we want you to choose your own adventure. Pick one question. What do you like about the model for addressing conflict? And is there anything missing specifically? It's a model, not the model, a model. Which of the 4 dialogue tips do you struggle with most and why? Pick one of those questions and go.
All right, take 30 more seconds, and then we're going to wrap it up. All right, so we want to wrap up tonight, and believe it or not, look at where we've been. We've talked through together. Let's see if it works. Let's see if the clicker works. It might have just given up the goat. It's ready to go. There we go. The roadmap is this. We've been to the root. We've talked about the urgency, the trigger, the approach. We just talked about the delivery. And let's end our time together talking about the win. The win of what it looks like to engage in conflict and confrontation that leads to resolution. And ultimately, we hope, restoration. Often we want to not be in conflict with all those around us. However, we know that conflict, now even being around these circles tonight, that conflict is not all bad. And so we need to do these things. I'm going to give them all to you so you can fill in the blanks, and then we're going to just hit them really quickly together. Is this: we need to listen to learn. We need to listen to learn. And what I mean by this is that ultimately, conflict and confrontation doesn't always end well. Spoiler alert. It doesn't always end well. But what we should take away from a conflict or from confrontation is that we've learned something about the person that we're in conflict with. And we've also learned something actually more greater, and that's about ourselves. We've learned about ourselves. Oh, also, the win wasn't it was number 5 on your list, and so just don't get confused by that. Number 5 is the win. It's just not for the rest. And then you can take all kinds of notes all around it. I forgot to say that. So number 5 is the win, and you have all those right there for you. If something was missed, just fill it in for us at the end there. The win is that you've learned something about the other person, because conflict and confrontation will not always end the way in which we perceive that it will, or end in a good crescendo, okay? It will not always do that, but we will listen to learn. We talked about the power of actively listening. What does it look like for us to actively listen and to repeat back as we're in that conflict of what we're hearing? What does it look like for us to be active listeners? Also, we know that we need to remember that we are all in process. What does that mean? What that means for us is that don't forget that you sometimes not only have conflict and confrontation inside of you, but you sometimes create conflict. You're a conflict starter here. We're not just talking about those people that are outside this room, people in our neighborhoods, people in our church, people in our workplace. We're talking about you. Remember that you are in process also. And as we remind ourselves that we are all in process, we remind ourselves that as we keep focused that we're all in process, my hope is that we become more generous. We become more generous in how we communicate with one another. We become more generous in our assumptions of one another. We become more generous in the way in which we speak to one another and also about one another. When we realize that we are all in process. We all have something to learn, and it is not wrong for us to say, I'm growing in this, or I don't do great at this, or I have caused this. When we fail at admitting or understanding that we're all in process, it's actually we stunt our growth to learn and also to grow. I know it sounds very elementary, right? You're probably sitting here tonight and saying, I didn't have to come for just that, but I do want to remind you that you're a human being. You're a human being, And God has created you in such a way that the imago Dei, the image of himself, is inside of you. He's made you. And because of that, he also knows that you're in process, that I'm in process. And that's why we hope for and long for restoration, why we hope for and long for resolution. And lastly, win the person, not the argument. What would it look like for us as people and as followers of Jesus to be about winning the person rather than the argument? How does this look for us as we go into our workforce? How does this look for us as we lead our team? How does this look as we are identifying and lead in our relationships? What does it look like as we grow our families and lead our families? That we want to be people that win the person and not the argument. He said, at the end of the day, we are all human beings, you know this, but conflict and confrontation, if handled correctly, and also handled within a spirit of humility and confidence, I believe will give you and I some of our greatest moments of growth and also our greatest moments of where we see God do what only he can do. And that's when he shows up when we can't. And so when we focus in on winning the person rather than the argument, all of a sudden, conflict in that moment, just to be real honest with you, in that moment in the kitchen just a couple of days ago on Monday, in that moment, was that Monday yesterday? Yeah, wow. Lord. Anyways, just yesterday, as I'm in that moment and with Monique and we're having that moment, do you know what brought me back from the whirlwind that I have created? The debris that I had made mention and in that space? It was when I remembered that there was a person. It was a moment when I looked at my bride and I realized that was not the right way to have that conversation. When we focus in on the person, I promise you, our conflicts and the way in which we operate will begin to subside because we ask the Holy Spirit to guide us, right? And to bring us back center, because I didn't want to win the argument anymore in that moment. I wanted to win the person. And I know you're here tonight because you want to do the same thing. You want to win the person, to win people, and for yourself, what it looks like for you to have conflict and confrontation. So as we wrap up our time in this final table talk, I'm going to actually ask you to only focus in on question 1. What are some other wins that come to mind when conflict is handled healthily? Take a moment around the table just really quickly, and then we're going to invite Tony back up to wrap us up together tonight. What are some of those wins? Just focus in on one, and then we'll wrap up in just a moment or two.
take about 30 more seconds, 30 more seconds. All right, let's bring it back in for the last time. Whew. So we've drank through a fire hose of content here, and what's super cool about this is when Dave and I both were preparing our sides of the content, it's like me listening to Dave as a college student all over again, and hearing some of these things, and like, oh yeah, like I need to still learn that, or oh yeah, I need to still do better in that, and but like I guess I wanna end with this notion of, and it's really just piggybacking off of what Dave said, that we can learn from anyone, even the person that you are at odds with right now. The moment that you feel like you can't learn from someone is when you start losing it as a leader. The moment that you feel like I can't learn from you is the moment when you start your own demise in the pride fall. So I know from first-hand experience how wildly, painfully difficult conflict can be when it does not come to a resolution. And you have to part ways. You can still learn from that person. You can still be better and not bitter. Easier said than done, but you can. So sometimes there's not a bow at the end of a conversation in conflict. So that's not an optimistic way to end the conversation, but it's real. But it's real. So, my goodness, thank you for sitting through this for 2 whole hours. And Dave just wants to, as we conclude, Dave wants to pray over you, and then I'll give an announcement, and then we'll be wrapping up our time.
Cool. Let's go to God in prayer together. Let me pray over you. Father, I am so incredibly grateful for this time together with these leaders. And in this room, I can just sense a spirit of learning and growth. Thank you so much for each one. And we ask, God, that you would go ahead of each one this week, tonight, tomorrow, as we have opportunity to engage in conflict and confrontation. We ask, God, that you would help us identify our own triggers, and then help bring forward some of those just phrases or even moments of where we wrote in the margins of what you were speaking directly to us. We ask that you would do that. We also ask that it would be from this room, that this church would be known for as a place that conflict may happen, but restoration and resolution happens all the more. May we be a people that identifies and loves you most as we follow after you, King Jesus. We love you and adore you this evening and ask for you to go with us. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen, amen, amen. Hey, can we thank Dave for being with us today? He means more to me than words can express. When I think about some of the 5 most influential people in my life, he is on there. And I am the man and the leader. A big portion of that is attributed to you, my friend. So thank you. And As we wrap up, a couple of housekeeping things. Number one is that I will send out, as I usually do if you've been to a seminar before, I'll send out an email sometime tomorrow that just gives you the link to this one. If you wanted to watch it back, if you wanted to share it with someone, it'll have the notes in there to be able to also download and whatnot. The previous seminars as well, like the one I referenced with Tiffany Lentz and I on active listening, you're welcome to go back to any of those. And that's there for you to enjoy and keep learning in that way. The next thing I would usually do is I would click a slide and I would say, hey, the next seminar is coming up. Mark it on your calendars. Be the first one to sign up. You get the gold star if you do. And that is not happening because we're kind of coming to a pivot and a transition in my life and with where I'm at with Gateway. Still working here with Gateway as the student pastor, but I'm going to be relinquishing my hat of the leadership development pastor in order to pick up an opportunity to serve with an organization called National Network of Youth Ministry. And in this organization, it is all they do is come around youth pastors and coach them and equip them and pray for them and do what they can to help lift their arms in the trenches of ministry. And I'm going to be having an opportunity to partner with them in that. So with every great yes, you have to say a no. And so this is a bit of a no that that Mary Beth and I have been landing on. And so the Develop Leadership program that we've had here is not gonna be no more per se, but it's gonna look differently and differently to come. Not quite sure at some moments of what that's gonna look like. If I haven't told Susan this and I haven't told Scott this, so this will be fun. I have every intent. Intent is different than impact, so I'm putting myself at risk here. But I have every intent for this. A night like tonight, my goodness, I love to sit in a room of 40 people that just want to learn and soak up leadership is so humbling. I have the intent that I would like to still do seminars, and I don't know what that looks like and in what capacity, but my desire is maybe through my National Network of Youth Ministry partnership, I can still do some seminars here at Gateway. I don't really know, but we're going to figure that out because I love this way too much, and it reminds me over and over again why I love sitting with other learners and leaders. And so there's a teaser. You will be, since you signed up for a seminar, you are on an email system already, so if there's a seminar in the future, you will be the first to know. I can promise you that. But I've just been so honored and humbled to be a part of the Develop seminars that we've done over the past 3 years. And just thank you for being a part of this learning community together. So that being said, the last housekeeping is to say that we have a crazy cool event coming up in just a couple of days. It's called Fall Fest. There's a flyer on your table. I want you to take one. I want you to hand it out to a friend, hand it out to a neighbor, hang it out to the person that you are, slide under the stall in the bathroom really awkwardly to the person that you have no idea who they are. How awesome would that be if someone came to the Fall Fest because they had a bathroom invitation slid under their stall? How awkward and cool would that be at the same time? But take one of those, and if you're like, I need 7, great. We will find more in the building. I literally stole them from all over the building to put in here. So we'll find more for you if you want to invite someone. We would love to have you at our Fall Fest from 1 to 4 on Saturday. Friends, thank you. I love you. I appreciate you. And have a great, 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 great night. And thank you for crushing the apple cider. Like, that was amazing. So there's like 2 cups left. Maybe someone go run over and steal the last of it. Have a great night. See you later.